The stars had no voices. They burned, they glowed, they died, but they never spoke. For years beyond counting, the alien girl drifted among them in her lonely ship. She could not remember the last time she had heard another living voice. The sound of her own breathing and the quiet hum of failing machines were the only proof that she still existed. Her ship was small, almost broken, more like a coffin than a vessel. Its walls carried cracks from old battles with meteors and storms. Of cosmic dust, the once bright panels now flickered with weak light, barely keeping her alive. Food was gone long ago. Water came only from slow recycling. Each day, survival was not a choice but a struggle. She sat by the viewport, staring into the endless sea of darkness. Stars filled the sky like scattered diamonds, but they gave her no comfort. They were cold, unreachable, and silent. In the beginning, she had spoken to them. She whispered her thoughts, her fears, even her songs. But the stars never answered. After years, she stopped trying. Time became strange. Days and nights lost meaning in the endless dark. Sometimes she wondered if she had already died and was only a ghost adrift between galaxies. Her reflection in the glass showed a face she barely recognized. Her skin had grown pale under artificial light, and her eyes carried the weight of centuries. She was still young by her kind's measure, but loneliness had carved lines of sorrow deeper than age ever could. Long ago, before the silence, she had lived among her people. They had ships, cities, laughter. She remembered the sound of voices echoing in great halls, the touch of friends who held her hand, the songs sung beneath alien skies. But those memories now felt like dreams. With each passing year, they grew fainter, slipping away like mist. She feared one day she would forget them completely, and then she would truly be alone. Sometimes she closed her eyes and imagined someone calling her name. She imagined footsteps in the narrow hall of her ship, the warm smile of another face. But when she opened her eyes, there was nothing but the blinking lights of her dying vessel and the hollow silence of space. She tried to keep her mind sharp. She repaired what little she could. She checked her navigation system, though it showed the same empty void every time. She wrote messages in her ship's log, even though no one would ever read them. "I am still here." She wrote again and again, "I am still alive." But a question haunted her every day. For how long? She thought about ending it many times. One press of a button could open the airlock and send her drifting into the cold embrace of space. It would be quick. It would be quiet. The silence would finally win. But each time she stood near the control, her hand trembled, and she could not do it. Some small piece of her still hoped. Some fragile spark inside whispered that life might return, that voices might find her, that she was not forgotten. And so she waited. Waited through years that felt like centuries. Waited while her body grew weaker. Waited while her spirit cracked. Under the weight of endless nights, the silence pressed against her like a heavy cloak, wrapping tighter with every passing moment. But then, one day, the silence broke. It began with a sound so faint she thought it was only her imagination. A low pulse, like a heartbeat, deep within her ship's systems. She leaned closer to the console, eyes wide. The sound came again, not from her failing machines, from beyond. Her chest tightened. She pressed a trembling finger against the panel. Numbers flashed across the screen. The sensors had caught something, a signal. Her breath stopped. For so long there had been nothing but emptiness. And now, a sound. A voice, a ship, a dream? She didn't know, but it was real. She closed her eyes, tears forming. After endless years of silence, space had finally spoken back. The loneliness was not gone yet, but for the first time in centuries, she felt a spark in her chest. Hope. Her hands shook as she pressed the controls again, desperate to be sure. The faint pulse was still there, repeating at steady intervals. It wasn't the sound of her old systems failing. This was different. This was alive. For a long moment, she simply stared at the screen, afraid to believe. After so many false hopes, so many years of silence, could this really be happening? Her heart hammered in her chest. She leaned closer to the monitor, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. The signal grew stronger with each passing minute. It carried a rhythm, a pattern, something her mind recognized as deliberate, not random static, not cosmic noise, a message. She whispered to herself, her voice rough from disuse, Someone is out there. The words felt strange on her tongue, as though she had forgotten how to speak them. Her ship's old computer struggled to process the incoming data. Symbols flickered across the cracked display. Fragments of code did damage for her system to fully translate. But she understood enough. A vessel was approaching, large, powerful, and alive. Panic stabbed through her chest. She had dreamed of company for centuries, but now that it was real, fear overwhelmed her. Who were they? What did they want? Would they save her? Or would they destroy her ship and scatter her remains into the void? Her fingers hovered over the emergency beacon. If she sent it, they would see her. They would know where she was. But what if they were hostile? What if the stories she had heard long ago were true? Stories of humans who burned and conquered, who left nothing but ashes in their wake. The pulse echoed again, stronger now, closer. Her ship shuddered under a wave of energy as the signal locked onto her coordinates. She hadn't chosen. They had found her anyway. She froze, every muscle tense, as the view outside her cockpit slowly changed. From the endless backdrop of stars, a shadow emerged. At first, it looked like another dark fragment of space, but as it moved, its shape became clear, a ship, enormous compared to her fragile vessel, its metal hull gleaming with cold light, engines burning like suns. She gasped, covering her mouth with trembling hands. After centuries of silence, the void had delivered a visitor. Her ship's sensors flickered and hissed, trying to scan the giant approaching craft. The data was incomplete, but there was no mistaking the design. This was human. The rumors were true. They were still out there, still traveling the stars. Her pulse raced. She slid lower in her seat, fear gnawing at her. If the humans meant harm, she had no chance. Her weapons were long dead. Her engines barely worked. Her ship was nothing more than a drifting coffin. She could not fight. She could not run. Her thoughts swirled. Should she hide? Should she try to communicate? Should she prepare for her end? The silence in the cockpit pressed heavier than ever, broken only by the faint static of the human ship's signal. Then it happened. Her speakers cracked with noise, then cleared. A voice spoke. Unknown vessel, we see you. Respond. Her chest clenched. The voice was deep, steady, filled with authority. Human. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. Her mind screamed for her to answer, but her voice would not come. Her lips parted, but no sound escaped. She hadn't spoken to another living being in centuries. The weight of silence chained her tongue. Again, the voice repeated, firmer, closer. Unknown vessel, we see you. You are not alone. Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her shaking hand against the console, forcing her voice out, a whisper at first, then a broken cry. I am here. Her words cracked the air like lightning, filling her cabin with sound she hadn't dared to imagine for so long. For a moment, she covered her mouth, unable to believe it. She had answered. She had spoken. The console sparked, alive with the human reply. Relief and urgency mingled in their tone. We hear you. Hold position. We're coming to you. Her body trembled. She wanted to trust them, wanted to believe, but fear lingered. What if this was the end? What if salvation was only a cruel trick of fate? The human ship drew closer, filling her viewport with its massive form. Lights crawled across its surface, scanning her vessel from every angle. She saw figures moving. Within the glass windows, silhouettes of people, real and alive. Their faces were hidden, but their presence was undeniable. Her heart pounded as the first docking clamps extended from their ship. Metal arms reached for her fragile craft, locking it in place. Her vessel groaned under the sudden pressure, but it held. For the first time in centuries, she was no longer adrift. Her breath came quick and shallow as she heard the hiss of airlocks preparing. Every instinct told her to run, to hide, but there was nowhere left to go. Her eyes burned with tears as she whispered, "Please, don't hurt me." The final seal clicked. Her ship shuddered. A doorway opened between her dying vessel and the gray human craft. The sound of footsteps echoed through her walls. She clutched her chest, every muscle frozen. This was it, the end of her silence, one way or another. And as the shadows moved closer, she realized something. After so many years alone, She was no longer afraid of death. She was only afraid of being left alone again. Her breath was shallow as the sound of footsteps echoed through the metal corridor. Every step was heavy, deliberate, and impossibly real after centuries of silence. She pressed herself back against her chair, clutching the thin fabric of her dress, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst. For years, she had begged the stars for a voice, for company, for anything that would end her torment. Now the stars had finally answered, but she did not know if the answer was mercy or doom. The airlock door hissed. Steam curled into her cabin, carrying with it a new smell, clean air, not recycled for centuries. It rushed into her lungs, sharp and overwhelming, reminding her of the life she had lost. She coughed, tears burning her eyes, and then she saw humans. The first figure stepped through, tall and armored, a helmet covering the face. Behind him, two more followed, their boots striking the floor with steady rhythm. Their suits glowed faintly under the dim lights of her failing ship, their presence filling the space with power and weight she had almost forgotten life could hold. Her hands trembled violently. She wanted to speak, to say anything, but fear locked her throat. Stories she had once heard came rushing back, rumors of humans who built empires, who fought wars with ruthless fire, who never forgave weakness. Were these the same? Would they see her as a survivor or as prey? The lead human raised a hand slowly, palm open, a gesture that spoke without words, a signal of peace. His helmet shifted slightly, and through the glass she caught a glimpse of eyes, not cold, not cruel, watching her carefully, cautiously, as though she might break at the slightest touch. Her lips parted, but her voice was nothing more than a whisper. Why? Why are you here? The human tilted his head, listening. Then came the voice again, clearer this time, through the translator in her cabin. We found your signal. We came to help. The words struck her like lightning. Help. She wanted to believe them, but suspicion gnawed at her bones. No one had come for centuries. Why now? Why her? Her body shook with the weight of choice. If she trusted them, her fate was sealed. If she resisted, she had no strength to fight. Either way, her silence was broken forever. The second human stepped forward, smaller, moving with less weight in their steps. Their voice carried a softer tone, calm and steady. You're safe now. We won't harm you. Safer. The word felt strange, almost foreign, after so many years of fear. She pressed her hands against her chest, her breaths quick and uneven. Her mind raced with questions she could not ask. Were they telling the truth? Could she believe them? Or was this just another cruel trick from the universe, offering hope only to rip it away? Her eyes darted between them. Every detail of their armor, every movement, every flicker of light on their helmets became etched into her mind. She searched for signs of deceit, but all she found was patience. They did not move closer without permission. They did not raise their weapons. They only waited, giving her time to decide. The silence stretched, heavier than before, filled now not with emptiness but with possibility. She thought of all the lonely nights staring at the void, whispering into nothing, waiting for a miracle. And now the miracle stood before her, breathing, alive, human. Her lips trembled as she forced out the words. I have been alone for so long. The lead human's helmet tilted again, as if studying her, and then his voice carried through the translator. Not anymore. Her knees buckled under the weight of the moment. For centuries she had dreamed of hearing such words, but now that they were real, she could barely stand. She collapsed against the wall of her ship, covering her face with shaking hands. The humans did not rush to her. They gave her space, their presence steady and unthreatening. For the first time in her endless exile, she realized she had a choice. She could let them in, allow them to carry her away from the coffin she had called home, or she could close herself off and remain trapped in the silence until death finally claimed her. Her breath hitched as she lowered her hands, her eyes meeting theirs again. The fear was still there, deep and sharp, but beneath it, something else began to rise. Hope, fragile, trembling, but alive. She whispered again, louder this time, please, don't leave me. The humans exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. Then the leader stepped closer, his hands still open, reaching out not with force, but with patience. We won't Her body shook as she stared at the outstretched hand. For centuries, she had lived in silence, untouched, unseen, forgotten. Now, with a single choice, she could step back into life, her fingers lifted, trembling, uncertain, but moving. The gap between them closed slowly, unbearably slow, until finally, her hand brushed against his glove. The warmth of contact, even through layers of armor, rushed through her like fire. For the first time in an eternity, she was not alone. The moment her hand touched his, the silence inside her ship seemed to shatter. A warmth spread through her chest, fierce and unfamiliar, as if the universe itself had reminded her what it meant to be alive. For so long she had been nothing but a shadow drifting among stars, and now here was proof, undeniable proof, that life still reached for her. She tried to hold on, her fingers trembling against his armored glove, afraid that if she let go, the vision before her would dissolve like all the dreams she had clung to during her exile. The human's grip was steady, strong without being cruel. He gave no pull, no demand, only an anchor in the storm of her fear. Behind him, the others stood silent, waiting, as if they understood how fragile this moment was. The air between them was thick with something that felt heavier than words. Centuries of loneliness pressed against her, begging her to accept what was offered. Yet deep inside, fear still whispered, "What if they are not what they seem?" Her voice was barely audible. "Why? Why? Would you save me?" The leader paused, then spoke with calm certainty, each word measured, deliberate. "Because you are alive, and no one should be left to die in silence." Her lips parted in disbelief. For so long she had believed herself forgotten, cast away by time and distance, her existence reduced to a drifting ghost. And now here were strangers, humans, saying her life mattered. Her chest ached with the weight of it. She wanted to cry, but the tears would not come, trapped beneath layers of exhaustion. The humans moved carefully through her cabin. Their eyes swept across cracked panels, broken wires, the weak pulse of dying systems. They exchanged low words in their own tongue, voices muffled but calm. She could not understand everything, but she heard enough to know the truth. Her ship was finished. There was no saving it. The realization struck her with both fear and relief. This vessel had been her prison, her only companion, her curse. To leave it would mean freedom, but also stepping into the unknown. She tightened her hold on the human's glove, her breath uneven. "If I go with you, will you leave me again?" The second human, the one with the softer voice, stepped forward. Their helmet turned slightly, and though she could not see the face, she felt the warmth behind the words. "We will not abandon you. You have suffered too long. It ends now." Something inside her cracked. For years she had spoken only to the stars, begging them to answer. Now the stars had finally delivered, and the answer was not silence, but promise. The leader gestured gently toward the airlock. His hand remained open, inviting her to follow. Her legs felt heavy, as if weighed down by centuries of fear, but her body moved before her mind could stop it. She rose slowly from her seat, her steps uncertain, each one a battle against the voice in her head that warned of betrayal. The corridor stretched before her like a tunnel into destiny. At the end, the human ship waited, its lights glowing softly, a beacon in the void. She hesitated, her body trembling, then glanced back one last time at the place that had been her world. The cracked panels, the broken displays, the silence that had suffocated her for centuries. She realized there was nothing left here for her but death. Her eyes returned to the humans. With a breath that shook her entire frame, she stepped forward. The docking hatch opened wider, a hiss of fresh air rushing in. She stumbled as the difference struck her lungs, rich and clean, unlike the recycled staleness she had endured for so long. It was overwhelming, almost painful, but in that pain she felt life, real life. The humans surrounded her carefully, not touching unless she wavered, guiding her with patience. Their presence was solid, unshakable, like pillars holding her upright. When her strength failed, with every step, her heart pounded louder, echoing in her ears. She feared it might betray her, that her body might collapse before she reached safety. But the humans did not let her fall. Finally, her foot crossed the threshold into their vessel. The light was brighter here, the walls clean, the hum of engines strong and steady. It felt like stepping into another universe, one where death no longer whispered in every corner. She gasped, clutching her chest, as warmth washed over her. The leader spoke again. His voice softer now, almost kind. "You are safe." The words hit her harder than any weapon ever could. Safe. A word she had forgotten existed. She sank to her knees, tears finally spilling from her eyes. Her sobs filled the corridor, raw and broken. But the humans did not turn away. They stood with her, silent guardians, allowing her grief to flow. When she could finally breathe again, she lifted her gaze to them. Her voice cracked, but carried truth. I thought I would die alone." The smaller human crouched slightly, their helmet tilting. "Not anymore. You are with us now." Her tears blurred her vision, but for the first time in centuries, she did not feel shame in them. They were not signs of weakness. They were proof that she was still alive. She looked back one final time at the airlock leading to her old ship. The vessel was silent, dark, fading into memory. She realized she no longer belonged to it. She belonged here, among voices, among life. With trembling hands, she wiped her face and whispered, "Thank you." The humans exchanged glances again, and though their faces were hidden, she felt the weight of their understanding. One of them reached gently to her shoulder, steadying her. The warmth of that touch spread through her entire being, burning away centuries of cold. For the first time since her exile began, she allowed herself to believe this was not the end. This was the beginning. Her voice had not carried words in centuries, and when she tried to speak, the sound was broken and fragile, like a forgotten instrument struggling to play again. The humans waited patiently, their helmets tilted toward her, their silence filled, not with judgment, but with quiet expectation. She swallowed, forcing air through her throat, and whispered, "My name." The word cracked into two, barely audible, but it was enough to bring every helmet closer. Their attention fixed on her. She tried again, her voice trembling. "My name is Leora." The name hung in the air, trembling like a flame in wind, and for the first time in ages she felt real when she heard it spoken aloud. It was not just a sound, it was her identity, a proof that she still existed. She had feared that even her name would one day vanish, erased by silence, but now it lived again, carried by her voice, heard by others. The leader nodded slowly, his translator clicked before his words came through. "Leora, you are safe here." Her lips parted in disbelief. To hear her name from another voice after so long, it was like a miracle. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears, pressing her hand against her chest as if to hold the moment inside her. The humans guided her deeper into their ship, away from the thin corridor and into wide halls glowing with steady light. The walls were smooth, the air rich and clean. She stumbled, unused to such brightness, her body weak from years of deprivation. The smaller human walked beside her, ready to catch her if she fell, though they never touched without her consent. Every step felt like a passage into another world. They led her into a chamber filled with soft chairs and glowing panels. The room hummed with the sound of machines, but it was a warm hum, steady and alive, not the dying groan of her broken craft. She lowered herself into a chair, her body trembling from exhaustion. For a long moment, no one spoke. The humans simply stood near, their presence a shield against the fear that still clawed inside her. Finally, the leader spoke again. "How long have you been adrift?" She opened her mouth, but no answer came. How could she measure time when days and nights had vanished into endless dark? She lowered her head, whispering, "I do not know. Too long, years, centuries, maybe." Her voice shook with shame, as though the length of her survival was a crime. The humans exchanged glances. She saw no disbelief in their body language, only sorrow. The smaller one leaned forward slightly, their tone gentle. "You survived, Leora. That is what matters." The words cut through her like sunlight piercing storm clouds. For centuries she had seen herself only as a ghost, a remnant clinging to existence. To hear that her survival mattered, that it meant something, it stirred something fragile and dangerous inside her. Hope. Her throat burned as she forced another question. Why would humans save me, the leader's answer came without hesitation. "Because you called. and because no one should be alone in the dark. Her breath caught. She had sent so many messages into the void. Whispers carried on weak signals that vanished into silence. She had thought no one had heard. Yet here they were, proof that even the smallest cry could reach across stars. Her tears finally fell, sliding down her pale cheeks as her voice cracked again. I thought I was forgotten. I thought I would die, and no one would ever know I had lived. The humans remained still, letting her grief flow. They did not interrupt, did not rush her, only stood as witnesses, as if their very presence promised that her existence would never again be erased. When her sobs quieted, the smaller human reached up and touched their helmet, pressing a button. With a hiss, the glass lifted, revealing a face beneath. A young woman, her eyes bright with kindness, her features soft yet strong. She smiled, small but genuine, and spoke without the filter of the translator. Now you are not forgotten. Leora's breath froze in her chest. A human face, real, unhidden, alive. It was more than she could bear. She reached out instinctively, then pulled her hand back, afraid of crossing a line. But the human girl only nodded, encouraging, her eyes saying what words could not. For the first time since her exile began, Leora smiled. It was faint, trembling, but real. The leader placed a hand on the chair beside her, his voice firm but warm. Rest, you are safe here. We will take care of you. Her eyes darted between them, her heart racing. Every part of her wanted to believe, but the scars of centuries whispered doubt. Still, the warmth of their voices and the steady glow of their ship pressed against her fear like fire. Against ice. She leaned back into the chair, exhaustion pulling at her bones. But her lips whispered one final question before sleep tugged at her. Will you stay? Or will you leave me too? The young human woman leaned closer, her voice steady as stone. We are here, and we will not leave. Leora closed her eyes, the sound of those words wrapping around her like a blanket. For the first time in centuries, she allowed herself to drift into rest, not from despair, but from safety. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with voices. When she woke, the light was softer than before, a steady glow filling the human ship's chamber. For a brief moment she thought it was another dream, one of the many illusions that had tormented her during long years of silence. But then she heard it, the quiet hum of engines, the faint rhythm of voices somewhere beyond the walls, real, alive, not a trick of her lonely mind. Her chest tightened. She sat up slowly, her body weak but her senses sharp. The chair beneath her was comfortable, firm but soft, unlike the cold metal seat of her own failing ship. She looked around, taking in the unfamiliar room. Smooth walls, glowing displays, and air so fresh it almost hurt to breathe. It was a different world. The door slid open with a low hiss, and the humans entered. The leader was first, tall and steady, followed by the smaller woman who had shown her face before. Leora's eyes locked on the girl immediately. That smile, faint but warm, grounded her. It told her she was still here, still real. You are awake, the leader said, his translator carrying the words into her language. How do you feel? She opened her mouth, hesitating. The words came softly, unsure, strange, weak, but alive. The woman stepped closer, her hands free of gloves now, carrying a small container. Drink this, it will help. Leora took the container with trembling hands. The liquid inside was cool, clean, rich with flavor she had not tasted in centuries. She swallowed quickly, tears stinging her eyes as the water slid down her throat. Such a simple thing, but to her it was a miracle. She lowered the container, her voice breaking. I thought I would never taste this again. The humans exchanged glances, their faces solemn. The leader spoke gently. You have endured what no one should, but you endured. Now you will live. The words struck deep. She pressed the container to her chest, her fingers trembling. For so long she had only survived. The thought of living again, truly living, was almost too much to understand. The smaller woman sat across from her, her eyes filled with calm determination. We need to know, she said softly. What happened to you? How did you come to drift alone in the stars? Leora's breath caught. Memories stirred like knives in her chest, memories of home, of voices that had once filled the air, of a people she could no longer find. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "There was war. There was fire. My ship fled. But others never came. I searched. I waited." And then her voice broke into silence. The leader leaned forward, his voice steady but kind. "You do not have to tell us now. In time, if you wish. For now, only this matters. You are safe." She looked at him, her eyes wide, disbelief still clinging to her heart. Could it truly be so simple? Could safety be something she could claim again? The ship trembled slightly, the engines shifting. A gentle voice came from the intercom. Human words she could not understand, but recognized as coordination. They were moving. They were carrying her away from the prison she had known. Her pulse raced. She rose unsteadily to her feet and moved to the viewport at the side of the room. Outside, she saw her old vessel, small and broken, still clamped to the larger, human ship. Its lights flickered weakly, its surface cracked and scarred. She stared at it, her breath shallow. That coffin had held her life for centuries, but now it looked smaller than ever, a relic of her suffering. The leader joined her at the viewport, his helmet now off, his face revealed. His eyes were steady, his jaw firm, but there was no cruelty. There, only strength, only resolve. He followed her gaze to the broken vessel. "It has carried you far, but its time is over." Her lips trembled. She wanted to feel anger, grief, something. But all she felt was release. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes, over." The humans gave the command. With a low metallic groan, the clamps detached. Through the viewport, Leora watched her old ship drift away into the darkness, shrinking until it was only a speck among the stars. Her body shook, but not with fear. It was as if a great weight had lifted from her shoulders. The silence of her past was gone, cut loose into the void. She pressed her hand to the glass, whispering so softly only she could hear, "Goodbye." The young human woman stepped beside her, speaking gently. "Now you begin again." Leora turned. To her, tears running down her cheeks. "Begin again." "Yes," the woman said. "Your life does not end in that silence. It starts here, with us." The words wrapped round her like a promise. For centuries she had believed her story was finished, a forgotten tale lost to the void. But now, with these humans, a new chapter had begun. Her body swayed with exhaustion, but her eyes glowed with something she had not felt in ages, hope. The leader placed a hand over his chest, a gesture of respect. "You are not alone, Leora. Not anymore." For the first time in centuries, she believed it. The ship moved steadily through the stars, carrying her farther from the prison of her past with every passing moment. Leora sat near the viewport, her eyes fixed on the endless night. But tonight the darkness felt different. It no longer pressed down like a weight. It stretched wide and open, a path leading to something unknown. For the first time in centuries, the void did not feel like silence. It felt like possibility. She turned her gaze to the humans who moved quietly through their ship. Their voices were calm, their steps steady, and each sound reminded her that she was not alone anymore. Even the smallest noises, a cough, a laugh, the faint clatter of tools filled her with warmth. After years where silence had been her only companion, every voice was a gift. The young human woman noticed her watching and approached with a smile. She placed a small tray before Leora, food in sealed packets, and a drink beside it. "Eat." She said softly. "Your body needs strength again." Leora stared at the meal, her hands shaking. She had eaten only scraps, dry and tasteless, for as long as she could remember. She tore the seal slowly, the smell rushing up to meet her. Her throat tightened, her chest heavy with emotion. The first bite brought tears to her eyes. Real flavor burst across her tongue, flooding her senses. She laughed, a weak and broken sound, but it was laughter all the same. The humans smiled with her, their faces lit with quiet satisfaction. They did not treat her as a burden, but as someone worth saving. Every gesture, every word told her the same truth. She mattered. When she had eaten, the leader sat across from her. His eyes studied her carefully, not with suspicion, but with respect. "Leora," he said, his tone steady, "you survived where few ever could. You lived through silence, through despair, and you did not surrender. You are stronger than you." "No." She lowered her gaze, her fingers gripping the edge of the seat. I did not feel strong. I only waited. I was afraid. His voice did not waver. Strength is not the absence of fear. It is surviving despite it. Her chest tightened, her eyes filling again. These humans, strangers from another world, saw her in ways she had long forgotten to see herself. She felt as though her broken pieces were slowly being mended by their words, piece by piece, until she could almost recognize herself again. Later, the young woman guided her through the halls of the ship. Every door revealed wonders she could barely believe, rooms full of humming machines, bright displays, voices, working in unison. Life pulsed in every corner. The humans greeted her with cautious smiles, their curiosity clear. But none turned her away. None looked at her as though she were less at the observation deck. She stopped in her tracks. Through the vast glass window, an entire field of stars stretched before her, brighter than anything she had ever seen. Nebulae swirled like rivers of color. Planets glimmered like jewels. The ship sailed quietly among them, carrying her into a future she could not yet imagine. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. I never thought I would see beauty again. The young woman stood beside her, gazing at the same stars. It is only the beginning. There is more waiting for you than silence. Leora pressed her hand against the glass, the stars glowing beneath her touch. Her heart ached with gratitude, with fear, with hope. She thought of her years adrift, of the endless waiting, of the nights where she had begged for any voice to answer her. And now, surrounded by humans, she realized the silence had finally ended. She turned to them, her eyes shining with tears. Thank you, she whispered. You gave me life again. The leader approached, his voice calm but filled with promise. You are one of us now, Leora. Wherever we go, you will not be left behind. Her knees felt weak as the weight of those words sank into her. For centuries she had feared abandonment, but now she was told she belonged, truly belonged. The humans stepped back, giving her space, but she no longer felt the need to hide. She straightened, lifting her chin, her voice trembling yet strong. I will not forget what you have done. You did not just rescue me, you saved my soul. Silence fell in the chamber, but it was no longer empty. It was the silence of awe, of respect, of a moment too great for words. The ship glided on, carrying her into a horizon she had once thought unreachable. The stars burned brightly ahead, and for the first time, she did not see them as cold or distant. She saw them as doors, each one leading to new beginnings. And as she stood there, surrounded by human voices and human strength, she realized the truth she had waited centuries to learn. She was not forgotten. She was not alone. Her story was no longer one of endless silence. It was one of rescue, of rebirth, of a future yet to come. And as the human vessel carried her forward, Leora let herself believe, fully and completely, that she had been saved.